Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic Recon, Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and know that new episodes air every Tuesday at 3 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. This week's guest is Bizzy Schorr. Bizzy, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
So Bizzy's husband, Trey, was on a few months ago. By the time this airs, it would have been a few months ago. And you know, even though I love couples testimonies when they can tell the story together, Trey had mentioned that Bizzy's a much better communicator, and he said you need to reach out to her separately. So before we get into Bizzy's testimony, Bizzy, why don't you tell the audience what you do, what you're up to? That would be helpful.
Sure. Actually, before we get to that, let's at least say Hail Mary. We start everything in prayer.
You're just like your husband. I like it.
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right.
Of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace.
The Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Amen. So I am first and foremost a homeschooling mom right now. And in my gads of spare time, I also do graphic design. And I do like some marketing consulting and that kind of stuff. I specialize in kind of two things: hand-drawn logos, where I take custom art and I talk through someone about what they love and what they're going for, and like the mission of their, whether it's a business or a ministry or an apostolate or whatever, and come up with an original drawing and then turn that into a vector logo and then a whole branding suite based on that. So it's not just cute little logos, it's kind of a big thing, but they end up really, really unique and really pretty. But then I also do huge campaigns, like a whole swath of stuff. So for instance, I am just starting on what will be my 5th statewide Catholic conference for Salt and Light Radio. I've done the last 2 women's conferences and the last 2 men's conferences, where I've worked with the leadership team to design the visual theme behind all of the marketing for the conference. The main image, the colors, the fonts, placements, effects, verbiage, copy, and not just designing the pieces, but the list of the pieces that we need. It's been a lot. So, but it's been really fun. It's a huge amount of work, but I really like doing it, and I've gotten really good feedback about it. So I really like doing that. And we are just now, as of the recording of this, getting into the weeds, starting to plan on 2021, which is going to be Saturday, September 11th. So put that on your calendars, ladies.
Excellent. And I'll make sure that I include any of the links that you send me in the description of the video. So much like Trey, why don't you start from the beginning and walk us through this long, winding journey of yours?
Sure, yeah. So I was born in the early 80s, originally in California, and my parents are 2 of the most amazing Christian people I have ever met. My father is right up there with one of the most solid Christian men I have ever encountered in my life. He's amazing. If you want to know what a gentleman of honor looks like, you look at my dad. I don't care what denomination you're from or whatever. You go look at Captain Dr. Johnny Green, sir. So he's awesome. They are pretty much non-denominational. As far as they never talked about particular denominations growing up. We lived for a while in San Diego. We spent 1 year in New Orleans. We were back in San Diego for a while. When I was about not quite 12, we moved up to Washington, and Washington became absolutely my home. I am a forest elf, if anyone wants to know. I have actually put that on what is your ethnicity questions. I have actually said I am an elf. I usually avoid answering them, but then when I went to college, the university came back to me and was like, hey, diversity is really important to us. Yeah. Can you please answer this question? Yes, sure. I'm an elf. You can tell I'm also a fantasy nerd. So
I was just gonna say, kind of an outlier, just slightly, but
Just,
probably.
just a
Yeah.
little bit. Anyway, I would love to meet someone who actually wrote dwarf on one of those questions. It would be great. I can get into a whole thing about how I think those questions are ill-formed, and that if you're going to ask, you should have a lot of options beyond just white. Like, it's fine to ask, but can we please identify beyond just like white? Because there's a spectrum of like 100 different ethnicities in there that have completely different cultures, and you've whitewashed all of them. Thank you, not thank you. Anyway, so through that entire journey, we went to church every Sunday. We decorated for all of the holidays. We, all of the music, all of the education, everything that I grew up in. All, if it wasn't overtly Christian, it was consistent with. My parents were very careful, especially my mom, very careful about what entered into our home and helping us to learn to process it.
Sure.
So lots of C.S. Lewis, lots of great fairy stories, lots of time at church, lots of going to see church plays, lots of Stephen Curtis Chapman music.
Yes.
It's really, really fun. Oh my gosh. I think I know all of them. Very, very steeped. There was no overt anti-Catholicism when I was growing up. It was kind of like the first time I remember hearing the word, here's a story. The first time I remember hearing a word, I was in third grade, I think, third or fourth grade. And there was another girl who actually lived across the street from me, but we weren't really close friends, but we were at school, and she was kind of with some other friends, and she suddenly leaned over and she made some question. She asked me like if I was Catholic, and I'd never heard the word before. And I was like, well, if I have no idea what that means. If I don't know what it means, then I'm probably not it.
Yeah.
Right? If I've never heard this before, I can't really be something if I don't know what it is. So no. And then she tried to tell me that I wasn't a Christian because I wasn't Catholic. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Because I am a Christian. Because I go to church every Sunday. And the Protestants talk about saying the Jesus prayer. Like, their definition of what is a Christian is like someone that has, anyone will tell you, pretty much anyone, accepted Jesus as the Lord and Savior of your life. You accepted Jesus into your heart. You've been born again, that kind of stuff. And there's kind of an official, not official sort of prayer, at least outline of something along the lines of, Jesus, I'm a sinner. I confess my sins. I accept you as my Lord and Savior, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Which for any of us as Catholics, we kind of hear that and we're like, that sounds really empty and kind of lame. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of feels that way too. Except when you're 2 and you're singing it in the backseat of your car, because everything is awesome when you're 2 years old.
Wait, they had a version of the sinner's prayer that was set to music? I don't.
Not
understand.
really. It was. It was just me as a 2-year-old, just kind of sing-song babbling in the back of the car. Sure. Yeah. But people talk about spiritual gifts. One of my absolute top ones is faith. I was born with the conviction that God was real and who God was. He was as much a member of my family as my parents. There's never in my life, people talk about the dark night of the soul, and there are times I can get to later in my story where I kind of understand what that is. Yeah. Like, there have been some dark patches, but never anything to the extent of, I don't believe God is real, or even I don't know that God is real, or is God who he says he is. To me, that's kind of like trying to imagine what it would be like truly visualize, feel in your body to not need oxygen. Because if you start thinking about that, what would it be like to not need oxygen? You stop breathing. And in less than a minute, you have problems. I mean, unless you've actually trained in that. But at some point, very, very soon, you're going to have problems. So you can't really visualize what it will be like to not need oxygen, because your body starts to shut down. That's kind of what it is for me with like trying to imagine life without, and some people quibble about the word. Well, you don't know, you just believe. And I'm like, but it is knowing. Even as a child, even when I couldn't read anything, hadn't memorized anything, there's just that sense of fatherhood, of having the Father. I've always had that. Always.
That's incredible.
It's amazing and it's absolutely God. I have nothing to do with that, but I will take it and run with it to the end of time. Thank you. I would really rather not try to live without that. So,
Yeah.
so that was most of my upbringing. Fairly sheltered, lots of adventures in reading, great family life, but not anti-Catholic, but not really any exposure to Catholics like at all. It never came up. Not really, ever. We never really went to any particular denominational church. We went to a Calvary Chapel for a while. I don't even know what some of the others were. I think one of the first, well, here's the thing that will become a theme that I didn't even know was a theme until much later in my life, is mystical experiences. And I feel pretty confident saying now that there's a tradition of mystics in the women's side of my family, even though they're not Catholics and wouldn't really know what that term means. I know there's a story of my uncle when he was a baby. He had caught an adult strain of pneumonia, and the hospitals at that time, particularly the military hospitals that my grandma had to use, were not kind, not very good. And they had basically written him off, that there was nothing they could do for him and he was going to die. And she wasn't even allowed in the room. And she had one son a year older than the one who was dying, than my uncle, and then my mom, who was an infant in arms, who was like 3 months old or something like that. And her 1-year-old son is in the hospital dying of pneumonia, and they won't let her be in the same room. And they just have a nurse sitting there to mark the time of death.
Oh my gosh.
And hundreds of miles away, oh, and her husband is deployed. Thank you. Hundreds of miles away, my great grandma is out in the fields on the farm and hears a voice out on the fields telling her Bob is dying. And she stops and she looks around and there's nobody there, and she keeps working. And a few minutes later, she hears another voice, the same voice again. Bob is dying. Hope is dying, which is actually my grandma. So talking about her heart, Bob is dying. She stopped and she's like, heck no. And she, down on her knees in the middle of the field, starts praying. Hundreds of miles back the other way, the thermometer on my uncle's body temperature starts going up. And all of a sudden he's fine.
What?
All of a sudden he's fine. And they tried to, after that, go tell my grandma, we don't know what happened. It's just a miracle, but his legs got all messed up. One of them is never going to grow right. He'll never be able to walk. 3 months later, the kid is climbing out of his own crib, stealing cookies from the cookie jar. And since that moment, he has at least 3 times, there might be more, literally saved people's lives. Like been the first person on the scene when a car rolls off the road and he pulls a guy out of the wreck, kind of thing.
Yeah. Wow.
At least 3 times. And the people tried, when he was, less than 18 months old, tried to say he was going to die and then he was never going to walk. So that was my great grandma. There's also stories of my grandmother having prophetic dreams. And one of those was she reports it as a very, very vivid dream, like so much detail. They were driving down the road and my grandpa was driving, and she knew exactly what the fences looked like, exactly where the clouds were in the sky, and country road. They were in this kind of car. The light was at exactly this angle. All 3 kids were in the back seat. And there was this crossroad coming in. And in the dream, right as they're coming up, this red sports car comes zipping off around the corner, T-bones them. And in the dream, there's like a flash, and she kind of wakes up just long enough within the dream to know that her entire family is dead.
Jeez.
Months later, they're on a road trip and they're driving down the road, and she suddenly recognizes everything. The fence, the fields, the clouds, all of it. And she starts screaming, Carl, stop the car, stop the car, you have to stop the car right now. And he's just like, what? Crazy woman, what's going on? But yeah, if your wife started screaming at you to stop the car, you probably would too. So yeah, the car stops right before a crossroad, right as a bright red sports car goes zipping out right in front of them. The same car in her dream would have killed them all. So
yeah, a nice lineage of, as you said, mysticism.
Lineage, yes. So my first experience with anything like that, most Protestants would say was much more of a charismatic experience than what most Catholics would say is what we would expect as a mystical experience.
Yep.
Was a youth group trip when I was probably 15 or 16 for like a spring break thing. It was a couple of days. And it was a fun trip out in the woods, kind of by a lake. And like our last night, something came over everyone, all of the kids during the last worship service. And usually Protestant worship services are all kind of the same. And it's the same formula. Some people say, oh, well, the other mass is the same formula too. I'm like, well, yeah, but the mass has like 50 different parts. Anyway, but in this one, like for some reason, the first song, all of the kids like started crying. Like just kind of randomly. And it was like every group of kids like got together sort of in their group. And it was like every person sort of took turns, depending on which song it was, to like falling on your knees, weeping over like all of your sin, basically, about everything you'd ever done wrong and the mercy and forgiveness of God. And it was like, and it just went on. It just went on and on and on, like all night. Like we never had a sermon because the worship leaders were like, this is crazy. We don't know what to do. The spirit is in here, obviously, like really amazingly strong because every single kid is on their knees. What do we do? I don't know. Keep playing. Pick another song. Somebody pick a song. Oh, great. Here we go. I mean, really, it was like an hour and a half of just music stuff. And then there were some other things that night. One of the kids had a bit of a problem and everyone got out of bed and we all had a big prayer circle and more singing. And we all got home and every single kid went to their parents like, it's amazing. I love Jesus is awesome. And all the parents and the whole congregation were like, what did you guys do? Our kids.
Of course.
Know how to handle this. And so I mostly bring this up because it highlights kind of an important issue, I think, struggle for a lot of Protestants when they come vis-a-vis Catholicism, because Protestants sometimes have this weird block and they don't know it's a block and they don't know how to talk about it and they don't know which side they fall on it, and they can fall on different sides of it in different scenarios regarding the mystical and miracles and what they mean. And there's a lot of Protestants that are of the opinion that miracles only happened in the apostolic age, and when the last original apostle died, nobody could ever do miracles again.
That's right. Yeah.
A lot of them are like that. And there are a lot of other Protestants that are like that. I don't think so. And then there are some of us that are like, yeah, miracles literally happened in my family.
Well, one part is I just view it as a pendulum for sure. You know, there's that strict cessationism that you were talking about where it just ended. And then there's another camp that's like, unless you're seeing miracles daily, something's wrong. Yeah.
But I think most Protestants are kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I would agree.
But again, for most of that middle, it's kind of a thing we don't really talk about.
Yeah.
And so you run into something like this where you have like 100 kids come back from spring break and they have this experience and no one around them has the skills to help them process like what makes sense. What are you supposed to think about this?
Yeah.
So it kind of just became a store it in your heart for later kind of thing. So life goes on. I go to college. Trey told you all of our story of how we sort of
did he get it right? Did he get all the details right?
Oh yeah. You want to hear my side of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have one over there? I do. This is important. Okay, so from my side of it, I met my best friend in high school. We bonded over Tolkien and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
This is important. We shared a locker. We would actually write each other notes in Elvish, in the Elvish script from the Lord of the Rings.
No kidding. Wow.
Not at all. And we actually continued occasionally sending each other letters that way through college. And this is a really great skill because it means that you can be taking notes, i.e. writing each other notes.
Yeah.
And the prof comes and says, what are you doing? And you say, I'm taking notes. And they can't, like, what are they going to say? They don't read Elvish. So that was really fun.
Oh man, yeah. Trey was talking about how he just loved geeking out on all these subjects. What did he mention? I'm trying to think what it was. I think it was related to maybe it was Jk Chesterton. I forget, but anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
yeah.
Lots and lots of geeking out stories about Tolkien. We have so many, but that's important because then when I went to the, as he said, I went to the University of Washington, which I very, very lovingly term the heathen school. It's in Seattle. It's about 5 miles, 20-minute drive away from Seattle Pacific University, where my best friend went. And as I approached my junior year, I knew I really wanted to go study abroad. I was almost a year ahead in all of my credits and everything else. So I could go kind of do whatever, take whatever classes I want. It's basically a gap year, except out of school. So, I did all of that on my end. And I actually went to a town in Scotland called Aberdeen, which I kind of don't recommend. If you're going to go visit Scotland, go to Edinburgh, go to Inverness, skip Aberdeen, skip Glasgow. Go to all the little towns, go tour that coast, Highlands, that kind of stuff. Don't go to Aberdeen. It has a fond place in my heart because I was there for a year, but it's not a whole lot to see. There's a lot of really, really gray stone and really gruff people.
Really?
Not very nice to outsiders unless you have an insider introduce you.
Nice.
That's it. Okay. So anyway, but I was there and it was nice to be in England. It was fun. So when we found out that Kieran, who was my best friend, was going to be at the British Isles quarter the same year, so that spring quarter, we sort of made a solemn pact. We are going to go find the grave of J.R. Tolkien and we're going to go visit. Okay. So, but that depended a lot on her schedule. And so she, where they're going to be. And so she sent me the info that their team was going to be staying in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is the birthplace and death place of Shakespeare. And they're going to be there for a week, during which they're going to take a day trip over to Oxford, which is just like a 45-minute bus ride away, maybe an hour. It's not very far, which is where Tolkien, spent almost all of his life, in Oxford, where he taught, where he did all of his writing, all of that. So, and the timing worked out really, really well because it fell within what the rest of the UK education system calls revision week, which is this week between classes and exams. And the idea being, well, we know you skipped class like all the time and didn't do any of the homework. So here's a week for you to study before you do exams. Yeah, except I'm the child of a surgeon and a rocket scientist. Like literally that was my mom's first career. So yeah, I went to class and I did all of the readings and all of the homework on time. And I could take, and of course you don't do that in the US. You could have like 2 days between your last class and your exam. Like, yep. This is the expectation that you're ready to take the exam as of like the last day of class. So I was ready because that's what I'm used to. Okay, I have a week off. Nice. I'm gonna go to Stratford. See ya. So I get a train ticket. I go down to Stratford. And, we have about a day there. I get there Friday night. This is the really fun part. Saturday was the day in Stratford before we went. And Kieran and I ran off to the Royal Shakespearean Theatre and asked, we're like, hey, we'll see a show. This is the place of Shakespeare. We go up to the concierge and we ask, what's playing that's good? And she says, well, there's this, there's that. But what you really want to do is go around the corner to the Swan, where Patrick Stewart is playing Antony and Antony and Cleopatra. And so we ran around and we were the first people, and they're sold out, but we're the first people in line for return tickets.
There it is.
Still have my ticket. So this was Saturday, May 20th of 2006. And I mostly keep this because this was the day before I met Trey. Because the next day we got on the bus to go to Oxford. And in the seat behind us, and my friend and I are sitting here, and in the seat behind us is this guy. And I'd actually heard his name before, and I'd seen his picture because Kieran had come to visit me and done a dump from her digital camera, which was totally full of all of these pictures. And there was this one picture of him in Wales on the slopes of Cadair Idris, which is a mountain, as in quotes, as those of us in Washington, from Washington would say. And he has this giant walking staff. It's like huge. and he's just standing there and he's staring up. There's like this wall of fog or clouds like right over his head. And he's just staring at it with this most like intense, like amazing expression. Like he's seriously about to go on this huge adventure thing. And I'm like, and he had this really interesting name. Who's this guy? This is kind of interesting. But that was weeks ago. Not remembering it anymore. Whatever. So then we have this really great day though, because we got this bus ride. We spent a lot of it talking. And then we hiked these 5 miles in the pouring rain with my friend Kieran, and there's 2 other gals that didn't have any plans for the day that were in the circle with Trey and Kieran. And so they came along with us. And again, a lot of it talking to Trey. It was great. And I hear later that all of the other girls on this trip are spending the whole day like, you guys see what's going on with Trey? Oh my gosh, he's totally in love with her. This is really awesome. I didn't think that was ever going to happen. They're like seeing these sparks flying the whole time. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. totally oblivious. And so, but it was a really great day. It was a really fun day. And then it was just about a year before we saw each other again after that, actually. It was like this one really fun day. And then it was almost a year later. But when we did run into each other a year later, we then were able to hook up on Facebook. Because I was actually at first on Facebook as Elizabeth, not Bizzy. And there's like a million Elizabeths, and he didn't know what my last name was.
Oh, yeah.
So he couldn't find me. And for some reason, I didn't think to look him up in the meantime. And this was back when Facebook was like, you could enter your classes and find the people that were in your class. So, I'm in section C.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
Early days. Yep.
Oh, yeah. So, and then we started chatting on Facebook, and we had decided that we were going to spend, by then we were just starting our last quarter of college. And we had decided we were going to find the best pub in Seattle before graduation. And so for some reason, shows you how crazy college kids are. We were going to do this every Wednesday night, and he was going to pick me up at 10 o'clock, and we were going to go find a pub and alternate who got to pick the pub and who got to pay for it.
Nice.
And each time we only got like one drink. And then I think the first time we just talked forever. And the second time and beyond, we wound up coming back to my dorm room and watching anime for like hours into the night. And of course, my dad is like immediately like, oh, really? What's going on? And I'm like, Dad, it's not what, no, we're just friends. I was so not in a space to even want anything more right then. And my dad's like, guys don't just do that kind of stuff. Every week, in a different pub, watching anime, they don't do that.
Now, any part of this, were you guys discussing religion? When did that even come up?
How did religion come up?
Yeah, when did it come up?
When we were dating?
Yeah.
Not a lot. And the main reason that I don't think it came up a lot overtly is that we both kind of approach literature and culture from a foundation so thoroughly steeped in faith and theology that everything is faith.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you have that lens that you view the world from, The Lord of the Rings is almost the Bible. And then people are going to go, I'm like, not really. But when your foundational lens is so steeped in the Bible and in faith and in studying the Bible and theology and everything else, then that is what you see in everything you consume.
Very true.
So, yeah. So like Trey, if anyone has seen the Boondock Saints, you'll get this. If you haven't seen the Boondock Saints, don't. But we had both fairly recently seen the Boondock Saints, and we would talk about the Boondock Saints and connect it back to like the apostles and like
yeah. I understand
insights into humanity.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah. And honestly, and because Tolkien in particular, Tolkien and Lewis, and there are lots of other writers that write from that foundation, when when a lot of your passions are about those things, there really isn't a whole lot of separation between talking about the fall of Numenor and talking about the history of Christianity and the development of theology. They're very, very close.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
If anyone wants to know about the fall of Numenor, email me. So. Anyway,
shoot.
I think it was about the fourth week that well, actually, so my perspective, this is where it gets funny. Third week, he's heading out. This tells you how fast these things go when you're teenagers. Third week, we're finally done. He's heading home. He's actually saying goodbye. We're outside my dorm. It's something about as he turns away, there's something in his expression. And it hits me like a ton of bricks in the face that he is actually interested. And my dad was right. And I choose that metaphor with care because I was not really happy about this at the time. Like, I'm writing my honors thesis. I made the comment earlier about the dark night of the soul, and coming back from England, there were a lot of things that sort of crashed together at the same time, such that I but recognized that I'd lost my way in a lot of areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of work to do to get back faith-wise to where I was before I went to England. And I'm not saying it was just England. There were a lot of things together that contributed to that. And some of them had to do with other romantic relationships. So all of that together was like, I need to focus on finishing school. What am I doing after school? And getting my life, my heart and my life back together. I'm not interested in these other things right now because it's kind of a distraction. I'm not looking for that. This was like crazy early Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, Trey calls me and asks me if I can go with him to a Mariners game on Friday night. And we had just said we don't really, either of us like sports, but there's a group at Seattle Pacific University that does activities for Seattle Pacific students who live outside of the dorms, like off-campus housing. SPU students are so fun because they're all Christian, or most of them are practicing Christians, so they're all clean, they're all safe, they're all intellectual, they're all really interesting. It's like, hey, that's always fun. It's always fun. And I'd never seen the new Mariners Stadium, the one with the roof that sort of comes in because it's Seattle. You kind of have to have a roof, or you're never going to be able to use your field. So they had called him and said they had a couple extra tickets, and did he know anyone? And he, went through this list, like, well, this person's out of town, that person's already going, etc. And he's, okay, I'll make a call. He calls me, and I'm kind of trying to come up with a good reason to say no, except that I kind of don't have one. Because just early, it was like less than 12 hours ago, I was like, he's interested and wants this to go places that I'm not interested in it going. But I don't have a good reason to say no to going with a whole group that I'm guaranteed to have fun with, to a thing I'm guaranteed to have fun at, that I don't have to pay for on a night when I have nothing else going on. Yes, okay, fine. And then I immediately called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, what do I do? How do I let this guy down? And she's like, why don't you just go have fun? I'm like, not worry about it. And then Friday morning, I have a Bible study with a bunch of my girlfriends, and I kind of walking them through this whole thing. And I'm like, how do I let him down and like not give him any ideas? And they're all looking at me. So let me get this straight. You have a guy who's about to graduate college, who's into all the same things you are, who's reasonably intelligent, and is a Christian, who will both learn to talk to you in Elvish and play Halo with you. And what is your problem?
Yeah, come on. This is eHarmony at its finest.
Yeah, really. So, and I'm like, girls, this is not what I wanted to hear. So I go that night, and we have an absolute blast. It's like
Awesome.
the funnest time ever. It was amazing. It was super fun. Within like 5 minutes, the two of us are cracking all of these insane inside jokes about sci-fi movies and anime and fanfic stuff and fantasy stuff. And everyone else is like, you guys even speaking English? I don't even know what's going on with you two. It was amazing. And then there was a friend, we went to this sort of after party with some of his close friends at a pub. And some people hear after party and they're like, college after party. I'm like, yeah, college English and theology majors at a pub at midnight. It doesn't get cleaner and safer than that, guys. It's like the most awesome thing in the world.
People reminding each other, you've already had one. Let's
No, they'll drink 3 or 4 pints. They'll drink 3 or 4 pints, but over the pints, they're talking about Aristotle and they're talking about Thomas Aquinas,
So
and
it's
they're
productive.
arguing about interpretations of different translations of the New Testament. And
it's productive, yeah.
Yeah. And if they're not talking about that, then they're cleanly talking about, like sci-fi movies and fantasy movies and video games with no swear words involved, and no one's throwing anything and no one's puking. So, this is actually really good. And everyone is good to drive home. So the wrap up with that is that as we're getting ready to leave, the one other gal in the group who was almost dating one of the other guys, and he wound up being one of our best men or one of our groomsmen, she leans over and she asks me, "So Bizzy, can I ask you a personal question? Are you guys dating?" And my answer was not yet, which is really telling considering that early that morning, I was asking my girlfriends to tell me how to let him down softly.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So I think Trey covered pretty much everything after that. It was awesome. So one of the cool things though, with all of those different story bits is, I think Trey mentioned this, when people ask me, why did you become Catholic? My quick summary version is that it was a long, slow romance. And the reason that is so accurate is that now that I am Catholic, I can look back my whole life and see things that God brought into my life that prepared me for the call. All the way back to, honestly, the reading my parents chose when I was a little kid. There was an awful lot of, what we would call, fantasy.
Sure.
And fairy stories. So knights errant, princesses in distress, magic spells. And some people might be like, well, why does that, what's up with that? And to which I say that the characteristics of those kinds of stories are, larger than life quests, things beyond material comprehension that have real effect on us and our lives now, that are not subject to empirical deconstruction.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
You cannot, no R&D pharmaceutical firm in the world can make a pill to fix the evil curse. Okay. And there's symbolism in that. And so coming into, Catholicism, symbolism is not just everywhere. It has meaning and power, like real power, in ways that are tangible. Like that's what the sacraments are. They are symbols that effect that which they symbolize. By the grace and glory of God, they have the power to do the thing that they represent doing.
Yeah.
So you can say, in a way, that confession to a priest is a symbol or a sort of reenactment of your confessing to God for your benefit, because you have this tangible thing. Mm-hmm. Since God and now Christ are intangible, God the Father and Christ are intangible, you can't see them with your eyes. It's difficult for our hearts to understand the forgiveness of our sins if we just sit in our own corner and pray, as Protestants always do, God forgive me for I have done XYZ. Because we are carnal entities. We are material, physical beings. We are fully integrated. That means that though our heads do something, our bodies need to do something too. We have to have something with our senses, or it doesn't stick with us. That's why we have symbols in the material world. And the magic, so to speak, the miracle, the amazing thing about the sacraments is that they are not just symbols that teach us, they're symbols that do the very thing that they symbolize.
Yep.
So we have to have confession with a physical person, because we as human beings we have a deep internal physical need to physically come before a physical person, body to body, eye to eye, face to face, to say out loud these words to another human ear.
Mm-hmm.
We have this need. Likewise, we have the need to hear in our ear their words, "You are forgiven."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, that need you could kind of do with like anyone, except that we have the added amazing knowledge and confirmation that when you do that in the sacrament of confession with an ordained priest, it's not a symbol. It's not just a thing to make you feel good. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what, all the sacraments are. But that doesn't mean that symbolism and the benefits of symbolism end with sacraments. It's with everything. The knight errant, from the earliest fairy story, from the most bizarre folktale, is all of us on our errand through life, pursuing the good, the true, and the beautiful. Because that's really what all knights are out there for. They're all out there pursuing the good, the true, and the beautiful. And all of their adventures are all of the crazy, messed up things that get thrown at them to stop them from getting it. And they have to fight the dragon because the dragon is stopping them from the good, the true, and the beautiful. And sometimes that is saving the town, like St. George, and saving England. Sometimes, and sometimes it's the damsel in distress. And
Sure.
Sometimes it's, this guy, burned my fields and whatever, and you have to go bring him to justice, whatever the tale is. And sometimes in the story, we're the damsel in distress that's been carried away and is going to be fed to a dragon, because we all are. We all are also the helpless person that has been carried away by forces beyond our control, and we're stuck and we need help. And then our knight errant, of course, is Christ, who comes to save us and to restore to us the agency to become the knight errant again. So enough deconstructing fairy tales, but you can see how in that symbolism, even as a very young child, when you hear these kinds of stories, this is the kind of symbolism that sticks with you, even if you have no idea what it means then. No idea at all. But then you go from there and you start reading The Hobbit, and you read The Lord of the Rings, you read the Chronicles of Narnia, you fall in love with Aslan, right? Who I just reread the Chronicles of Narnia, all of them as bedtime stories to my 5-year-old.
Amazing.
Oh, it is so hard for me to read the sections with Aslan. It was so hard, because as a grown-up, knowing how much it meant to me as a kid, trying to read it out loud to my son, I'm just like, all of my acting experience right now, come on, you can do it. You can do it. You're not gonna cry. You're not gonna cry. I totally cried. So, but all of that lays this foundation for a deep level of understanding of life being larger than we think that it is. And I am very much a larger than life person, not that like I personally really, that's just kind of almost the best way to phrase it, but I believe life is so much bigger than certainly our culture, but it's kind of bigger than that. It's not like just what you see on TV. Like the modern sensibilities have made life in all of its facets so small, right? So another, one of those things that I never even recognized before, but again, like I loved all of the medieval tales and the ones that had symbolism. And one of the things that I liked in sort of the tapestry of those tales was actually like monasteries and monks and nuns and, people in habits and, fancy clothes for going to church and,
I was going to say illuminated manuscripts, just
yes, illuminated manuscripts,
yeah, exactly.
and rosaries and special candles and I didn't even know really what a rosary was. Like I'd heard the word and I'm like, yeah, it's a string with beads on it and there's a cross in there somewhere. No concept. But there was something epic about those things, even when, what I just said, sum total of my knowledge. There's like nothing deeper than that, really.
Sure.
It's like these are people, they spend, the monks spend all their time in a monastery. A lot of them do lots of writing and they know lots of stuff and they pray a lot and they wear funny clothes.
And they sometimes make cheese and beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a long time, I didn't even know that. So, but there was kind of this, like, always this sort of longing in me that I would live a life that was that big, because sort of back in the day, we're talking like Renaissance or medieval or even the Dark Ages, antiquity, all the way through basically up until the modern era, we'll say. There was a danger in life. There's a risk, right? You never know, disaster could be right around every corner, right? Because back in the medieval era, even the Renaissance, you go jump off the picnic table as a kid and you land wrong and you break your leg, your whole life is ruined.
Yeah.
There's no modern hospital that can do an operation to put your leg back together and put you in a cast and 3 months later you're fine. No, your life is ruined because your leg is never going to heal actually straight.
Yeah.
In the medieval period. Never. You're never going to be able to really ride a horse well. You're never going to be able to be a soldier. And even if you're a woman, everything that you do, your entire life, you're going to be slower at everything you do. Whatever your craft is, it's going to be crazy hard. Like I talk about mortality rates for childbirthing. Heck,
Yep.
I mean, on and on and on. We talk about, oh, there's no cure for the common cold and it's terrible. Like, well, back then the common cold could kill you. Like, really? The chances of you getting pneumonia from the common cold back in the Renaissance era, I would not take that bet. No, thank you. I mean, but at the same time, that very knowledge gives like meaning to
Sure.
everything that you do. Like you can't waste a moment, but there's also no distractions. So walking down the road kind of has to become a religious experience, because everything has to be a religious experience, because it'd be the last one that you ever have, right? You don't have, because you're not comfortable in everything else, you are forced to see so much more and appreciate everything that's there. You can't just go down the road distracting yourself on your phone or where your schedule is, because I'm going to be fine, whatever, I'll see this road 10 million times. You don't know that. So there was always in me this something that wanted not necessarily that kind of life, right? In the detail kind of way, but that sense of life, that things matter, that the horizon is so far away and you can still chase it, right? But the only way our modern world gives us that is through story. It's the only real way, unless you're Catholic.
Yeah.
And so there was so many things that I now look back on and I'm like, drop.
That was brilliant. I love it.
Thank you.
Love that.
So when Trey told you about the church that we had in Washington, where the church family was awesome, it was very clear that God wanted us with those people, with those friends, serving them, forming that community. It was absolutely amazing. Love those people. Will love them to the end of my days. So many of them. And we grew a lot with a lot of those people. And we did a lot of music ministry. We did a lot of singing, both in choir and in worship. We did a lot of acting. They actually had a theater ministry where they did musicals. It was amazing. We both got to act. We actually both got to direct. We both got to do stage management and production. It was really awesome. I got to do choreography more than once. It was amazing. It was wonderful. Absolutely loved it. And he told you that that director is, oh my gosh, I'm spoiled for music direction probably for the rest of my life, because nobody will ever beat Mike Best. He was wonderful. So that would be great. But as he said, pretty much every time, so often during the sermon, there would be something that would come up. And, you know, as Trey mentioned, the two of us between us have a lot more education, like relevant education, than most people do. So I took a history of Christianity class at the University of Washington through their history department. And until I took that class, I did not even know that my understanding of the history of the church was the book of Acts and Luther. I had kind of no idea what happened in the intervening 1500 years. And I didn't even know it was a gap. I had no idea. I'd never heard of church councils. I knew there was a Catholic church and they had like bishops and they kind of had a pope, and there was a thing with the Crusades. That was kind of it. That was it. I'm sure at some point I did European history and there were things about the Holy Roman Empire and whatever, but none of that ever like took.
Yep.
No understanding of development of doctrine or anything. That class, and that was before I went to Scotland. That class absolutely changed my world. Complete paradigm shift. And the biggest takeaway, there were two big takeaways from that one. The first one was the indisputable fact that the Catholic Church single-handedly saved all of civilization during the Dark Ages, because they were the only ones who cared and could preserve any knowledge from before the fall of Rome. Every other library, school, everything else was destroyed in all of the craziness with the many invasions of barbarian hordes. And barbarian literally means not Roman, so that's like actually the term. The barbarian hordes, mostly Germanic, some Gallic, coming through civilization and destroying pretty much everything that had ever been written down. So much of it literally up in smoke with fires, and it was just gone, and nobody knew anything anymore. And so everybody went to survival mode. Everybody, except the church, because the church was a community and they had enough support as a community to have people like priests and monks to preserve the knowledge. And they were the only ones who recognized this is important. We must keep it. It's so important. We're going to dedicate so many of our absolute top people to just copying over and over again the same things, so that if this copy burns, we have another one. Yeah. But it's not like a Xerox copy machine. It takes years, decades to copy something back then. But without what they did, we never would have come out of the Dark Ages. It would not have been possible. And for hundreds of years, the church was the beginning and end of all learning. If you wanted to be a scientist, you had to go to the Catholic Church. I mean, people talk today about this like fight, this dichotomy between faith and science. And I really wish I could go shake people and be like, the church invented science. You would not have science if it wasn't for the church. You would not have any of it. You like your smartphone? You can literally thank the Pope, because 1500 years ago, the church was the one that said, we need to preserve the scientific knowledge and we need to develop on it. And over the centuries, the church was the one that said, this is what the scientific method is. I mean, it's been developed a lot. They didn't call it the scientific method back then.
Of course.
But they were the ones that developed the standards of how you could do research to actually prove something to be true. And they were the ones that had the knowledge. You wanted to learn how to build something, you went to the church because they were the only ones who knew. And some people might say, oh, well, they're gatekeepers, they're hiding. Like, no, they're the only ones preserving it. They were glad to share it. They wanted more people to know. So it's anyway, my perspective very much changed from studying that and seeing, you know, so many people like look at things like Martin Luther and Galileo and take those instances to be like, well, the church is just hoarding everything. They're hoarding knowledge. They don't want people to be able to read the Bible in their own language. They don't want, you know, they don't want scientists to make new discoveries. But when you actually look at the nuances of those scenarios, you realize, no, that's not at all what that situation was. In both cases, what you had was someone who didn't have the knowledge to claim what they were trying to claim and didn't have the authority to claim it in the way that they were trying to claim it. And the church trying to say, let's be reasonable about this. Let's have some standards. Let's have a reasonable discussion and actually look at all of the facts that we can verify are facts. And these two people, both of them saying, no, thanks, I'm going to do it myself, my own way. That would be these days like someone saying, I'm going to claim whatever bizarre thing. And we have lots of experience recently, actually, with lots of people coming up with something and not accepting any kind of critique or peer review about it, right? Someone saying, aliens are absolutely true. Here's my academic paper on it, but no other academics get to comment on it.
Exactly.
Everyone just, but you have to go teach it in your science classes now.
Yeah.
That's basically what both of those guys were trying to do. And now the church gets a bad rap on it. So that was a big perspective shift. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. The other thing that happened in that class was the professor recommended that I go read Orthodoxy by Jk Chesterton. And I absolutely fell in love. So one of the actually, probably one of the first moments that I overtly actually thought that being Catholic was possible was actually the moment several years after I read Orthodoxy, after I'd read it several times, when I read something in his biography that told me that he converted to Catholicism later in life, years after he had written Orthodoxy. And for me, reading Orthodoxy was like the pinnacle of theology. Like, this is everything. What more could you want? And then I'm like, this guy, after this, converted to Catholicism. And it was so important to him that this man who was notoriously late for everything made it on time to daily mass every day after he converted, every day. And he did it before his wife. He did not actually wait for her. And they had a really solid relationship. And both of those things were so telling. It's like, what? So another thing really quick before I go, because then we're short on time. So this is going to seem perhaps a little materialistic. Right after we moved over here, we had some incredibly good friends from Washington who converted to the Orthodox Church, which was the best thing for them. We met them at Grace Point before it was Grace Point, when it was Southern Baptist or Silverdale Baptist Church. And oh my gosh, so many amazing experiences with them. But as they converted to Orthodoxy, this gal sent me this link to this very facetious article about the struggles of choosing a mantilla veil. And it was really funny. And it was like the agony of deciding, do you want Spanish lace or French lace? And then you finally get it and you put it on and you go to adoration, and then you start feeling guilty that you're only come here so that you can wear your veil rather than coming to be with Jesus and on and on. And I got a really good laugh out of it. But I remember this is the time, we've left our home in Washington, which for me was my absolute home. I thought I would live there forever. I came kicking and screaming to the desert. I hated it. I did not really want to be here, but we kind of didn't have a choice. Missed all my friends. Didn't know what I was doing with life. All of the things we loved in our church back home, not so good at the church here. What we didn't like back over there was annoying us to heck here. But it was pretty early in that process, but everything's sort of in flux. But the big thing from this really funny article that came through was there are still women who wear veils to church. Because remember all that talk I said earlier about symbolism?
Mm-hmm.
And the symbolism, and so much of the medieval symbolism, pointing to this larger than life concept, this acknowledgement, this sort of access through our tangible senses of these things that are so big that we can know them without seeing them. And even without having it sort of explained what a mantilla means, like what's the history of it, why do you wear one, like all of the details, all of the sort of justifications that us strong-willed women of the modern era want to know. Why would I have to keep my head covered? I don't need to know any of that. There's part of me that's like, that's awesome, I want to be able to do that. This is my veil.
What kind of lace is that?
This is Spanish lace from Barcelona.
There you go.
I plug Veils by Lily. They're amazing. They're absolute beautiful. They have both French and Spanish lace, and ladies, if you do order one, make sure you get the Soman comb clip. It's magic. So, so there's my plug. I love Veils by Lily. But so to me, that's the sort of a thing of that to me, the Catholic Church was kind of like in the Dark Ages. The church preserved all of this knowledge, all of these abilities, these skills, these writings that would have otherwise been completely lost. Today, it is, at least I see, the sort of last holdout for sacramental iconography, for symbols that communicate things to our hearts, to our material minds, right? To the essence and the soul of who you are in ways that you don't really understand, and you don't have to. You really don't. Like you can see a woman in the veil in church, and if you are willing to just take a breath and just let go of the sort of automatic, like sort of misogynistic modern perspective of like that woman is like enslaved or whatever, let go of that and just breathe, and you will sort of automatically see the symbolism and the meaning of her being covered, pointing to the honor of Christ who covers her.
Love it.
And that's not something that you get outside of the church. You don't see things like that. You know, people talk, you know, what's the rosary? What about the crucifix? What about, you know, the sacraments, all of these rules. And, you know, my parents, we actually have a multi-generational house. We share a house with my parents who are not Catholic. And my dad was very much, well, you're still Christian. We'll miss having you in church with us. Okay. As I said, he's a surgeon. His definition of a bad day is his patient died in the OR.
Yeah.
He's got a pretty unique perspective. It's kind of a rocky road, rocky journey with my mom for quite a while. Praise the Lord, things have calmed down a lot. But one of the things that I often come back to, you know, sometimes with her, but also with other people, you know, is this sort of idea that people outside the church have about all, you know, all of these rules, all of these little things that you have to do. And I keep coming back to this idea that they're all tools to help us, because they acknowledge our reality. It's not a checkbox that we have to check off in order to be a good person. It's a lifeline.
Well,
It's
and people are drawn to these things. First of all,
Exactly.
you don't walk in and they say, here's a list of 800 things that you need to adopt in order to be part of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, for example, I love the rosary. I do not pray it every day because as you can kind of tell, I'm all everywhere. I mean, I will be consistent on a thing for anywhere from 10 days to like 2 to 3 months. And then life changes, something happens, someone gets sick, we go on a trip, somehow life changes and the whole schedule has to change. And
Sure.
It's like 6 months before I know what I'm doing next again. So, you know, there was a long period of time when I did pray the rosary regularly every day, every morning. And there have been several periods since then when I have done for, you know, a couple months.
Yeah.
But life gets in the way. It's a wonderful devotion. I absolutely love it. I have 3 or 4 of them, including a couple of chaplets, one of which has a relic of St. Faustina, which is amazing. But all of the devotions there, and all of the sacramentals, all of the iconography that add depth and meaning to our life in ways that we need and that the modern sensibility blinds us to, and it's starving us. And only the Catholic Church has it.
There you go. That was excellent. Between Trey's story and your story, I think you guys are, I guess, a walking parable, a walking allegory. You went so deep into the symbols. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate you guys both having slightly different perspectives, but they just weave together brilliantly. And, I wish you and your family just the best and continued blessings. You guys are awesome. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Likewise.
you. I appreciate you being on the show and sharing all of that. Probably the most unique take I've ever heard. But what was so cool about your approach, honestly, it is like drawing someone into a book and just being part of that. And what you said earlier about the theology, how you were raised, you can't help but view the Bible and Christian writings through that lens. And that's so important to Catholic teaching, the typology and all the allegory. Like I was saying, it's phenomenal. So anyway, with that, we'll have to cut it there. But folks, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. And again, please subscribe to my channel. And until next time, take care and God bless. Bye.
Bye.